sometimes the mind doesn't feel loud or chaotic. It doesn't feel like everything is falling apart. It simply feels full, as if it has been quietly holding too many small things at the same time. Not dramatic things, not urgent things, just a steady accumulation of thoughts, moments, and impressions that never had a clear place to settle. It can feel like the day has already ended, yet parts of it are still present, lingering without asking for attention, but also not fully leaving. There might be conversations that didn't finish cleanly, moments that didn't close properly, or thoughts that didn't get resolved, even though they no longer need anything from you. There is nothing you need to do with any of that right now. You don't need to organize it, label it, or understand why it's still there. This is not a space where things need to be solved or improved. This is simply a place where your mind does not have to keep carrying everything at once. A place where effort can soften without explanation, and where holding on is no longer required. You don't need to arrive here calm. You don't need to prepare yourself to relax or slow down. If your thoughts are still moving, that's completely okay. Sometimes the mind continues out of habit, not because it needs to, but because it hasn't yet noticed that it's allowed to stop trying. It can take time for that realization to arrive. There is no rush for it to happen. There are moments when nothing is clearly wrong, yet everything feels slightly heavy. Not heavy enough to explain, not heavy enough to point to a single reason, just heavy enough to feel. That kind of weight does not need justification. It does not need to be named or analyzed. It is allowed to exist exactly as it is, without being questioned. Your thoughts may still drift from one thing to another. They might revisit parts of the day, replay fragments of conversations, or circle around ideas that don't actually need answers. They don't need to stop. They don't need to disappear. They simply don't need to be followed. They can move on their own quietly without pulling you along with them. Right now, there is nothing you need to decide. Not what comes next, not what tomorrow should look like, not what should have been handled differently. Whatever can wait is already waiting. Nothing important is being missed by allowing yourself to stay here. This moment does not interfere with anything else in your life. It exists separately, without demands. Sometimes the mind stays alert long after it needs to. It continues holding things together, tracking details, staying ready for what might come next. That readiness can become so familiar that letting go of it feels unfamiliar. Here, you don't have to stay ready. You don't have to keep everything in place. You don't have to maintain control. You can allow that effort to loosen slightly without forcing it to disappear. You don't need to listen closely to every word. You don't need to focus or concentrate. This voice does not require your attention. It can move in and out of your awareness without changing anything. Whether you notice it clearly or only faintly, nothing about this moment depends on how closely you listen. Some thoughts return simply because they haven't had a quiet moment yet. Not because they are important and not because they need action, but because they have not yet had the space to slow down on their own. They do not need solutions. They do not need to be addressed. They only need time, and time does not need to be managed here. There is no pressure in this space, no expectation to feel better, no requirement to reach a certain state. There is no goal, no finish line, and no correct experience. This moment does not ask anything of you. It does not measure progress. It does not compare you to anything else. You are allowed to feel mentally tired. That tiredness does not need to be earned. It does not need to be justified by productivity or effort. Rest does not require permission. It does not need a reason. It is allowed simply because you are here. If something from earlier returns, you do not need to replay it. You do not need to look at it again or understand it more deeply. This moment is separate from everything before it. What happened earlier does not need to be carried into this space. There is no need to reach the end of anything right now. There is no conclusion waiting. Nothing important is being delayed by staying here longer. Everything that needs attention later will still be there when this moment passes. Your thoughts do not need answers right now. They can remain unfinished. Unfinished does not mean wrong. It does not mean something is missing. It simply means that not everything needs to be completed in order to rest. If your attention drifts away completely, that is fine. If you stop listening for a while, that is also fine. There is nothing here to keep up with. Nothing requires effort. Nothing requires presence. You are not expected to stay engaged. You do not need to improve anything about yourself in this moment. You do not need to change how you feel. This space does not ask you to become calmer, quieter, or more relaxed. It simply allows things to soften naturally at their own pace if they want to. Thoughts can move more slowly here, not because they are being controlled and not because they are being pushed away, but because there is no longer a reason for them to rush. They can take up less space. They can carry less urgency. They can become lighter without needing to disappear. You do not need to hold on to this moment. You do not need to hold on to the quiet. Whatever stays is allowed to stay. Whatever fades is allowed to fade. Nothing needs to be managed. Even if the mind wanders, even if it becomes quiet, even if it feels empty for a while, all of that is fine. There is no correct experience here. There is no expectation about how this should feel. You can allow the edges of the day to soften. You can allow the sense of time to become less sharp. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else requires your attention right now. This space remains open. It does not close. It does not end. Even as words become fewer, even as sound softens, even as awareness drifts, the quiet can remain. It does not need to be held. It does not need to be noticed. It can simply exist alongside you for as long as you need. And as it stays there quietly beside you, nothing else has to change. There is no expectation for you to feel lighter. No pressure to feel different. No requirement to move forward or move on. This moment is allowed to be exactly as it is. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything important. Right now, this moment is enough. You may notice that your breathing has its own rhythm. You don't need to guide it. You don't need to follow it. It knows what to do without your help. The body has been doing this for a long time. Long before any effort was required. Long before there were things to fix or improve. You don't have to manage it. If your thoughts wander again, that's okay. They don't have to stop in order for rest to exist. They can move quietly in the background, like distant sounds that don't demand attention. Nothing here is asking you to participate. Nothing needs a response. You are allowed to simply be here. If the weight of the day is still present, you don't have to push it away. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to carry it any further. It can rest beside you for now, without being solved. Sometimes the most helpful thing is not doing anything at all. Not thinking, not fixing, not preparing. Just allowing this moment to be exactly what it is. There is no correct way to experience this time. There is no right amount of calm to reach. There is no outcome waiting at the end. You don't need to reach a certain feeling for this to be working, even if your mind is quiet one moment and busy the next. That's still okay. You don't need consistency. You don't need progress. You don't need to measure anything. This is simply a pause. Nothing more is required. If it feels natural, you can let your attention soften, not by forcing it to relax, but by allowing it to drift wherever it wants to go. There is nothing here that needs to be held onto. No instructions to follow. No expectations to meet. Just space, and time, and permission to be exactly as you are. If your thoughts slow down, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. Everything is allowed to move at its own pace. You don't need to check on anything. You don't need to think ahead. You don't need to prepare for what comes next. This moment stands on its own. It doesn't need to connect to anything else. You can stay here for as long as you like, even if your awareness fades in and out, even if you stop listening for a while. This space doesn't disappear. It stays open, quietly, without expectation, without demand, just here. And when your attention gently returns, whenever that happens, you don't need to do anything with it. You can simply notice that you're here again. And that is enough. There is nothing else you need to do. Nothing else you need to understand. Nothing else you need to reach. This moment does not ask for effort. It doesn't ask for improvement. It doesn't ask for clarity. It only allows you to rest, in whatever way feels natural right now. And that is enough. There is nothing you need to prepare for in this moment. Nothing waiting just beyond your attention. Nothing asking to be solved or understood. You can let the sense of time soften, not disappear, just loosen its grip. Moments can pass without being counted, without being measured, without being noticed. There is no reason to keep track of anything right now. You are allowed to be here without purpose, without direction, without expectation. This moment does not ask you to do more. It doesn't ask you to improve it. It doesn't ask you to turn it into something meaningful. It is already complete as it is. If your thoughts drift, let them drift. If they slow down, let them slow down. If they wander into silence, that's okay too. Nothing needs to be corrected. Nothing needs to be held in place. You can imagine the mind gently loosening its grip, not pushing anything away, not pulling anything closer, just allowing space. There may be moments where you feel very aware, and moments where you barely feel present at all. Both are welcome here. There is no right way to experience this. You do not need to stay focused. You do not need to stay alert. You do not need to stay with the words. The words can drift past you, like quiet background sound, like something half heard from another room. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to remember anything. This space exists whether you pay attention or not. And as time continues to move gently forward, you may notice that nothing is asking for effort. Nothing is pulling you forward. Nothing is pushing you back. There is simply space. Space for the mind to rest. Space for the body to soften. Space for nothing in particular. You don't need to fill this space. You don't need to do anything with it. It can remain open. And you can remain here, even if your awareness drifts in and out. Even if you forget the sound of this voice for a while. Nothing changes. This space does not require presence to exist. It remains whether you notice it or not. You can let yourself sink into that understanding. Not deeply, not dramatically, just gently, like settling into a familiar quiet. Nothing is ending. Nothing is beginning. This moment simply continues. And you can continue with it. You don't need to do anything to stay here. This space doesn't close when your attention drifts. It doesn't disappear when your thoughts wander. It remains quietly, without asking to be noticed. Even if your mind moves elsewhere for a while. Even if it slips into fragments of memory or half-formed ideas. That's perfectly okay. There is no need to bring yourself back. You are allowed to drift. You are allowed to be somewhere between listening and not listening. Nothing is being tested here. Nothing is expected of you. If the idea of doing nothing feels unfamiliar, that's understandable. So much of the day asks you to respond, to react, to decide. So much of your attention is usually being pulled in one direction or another. Here, there is no direction, no forward movement, no task waiting on the other side of this moment. Just a gentle pause existing on its own. If you notice your breathing, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. There is no correct rhythm. There is no right depth. Everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. You might notice the body settling in small ways. A slight release in the shoulders, a softening around the eyes, a sense of weight being supported rather than held. Or you might not notice anything at all. Both are completely okay. Nothing needs to happen for this moment to be enough. Sometimes the mind expects something to change. A shift, a feeling of relief, a clear sense of calm. But rest doesn't always announce itself that way. Sometimes rest is quiet and almost unnoticeable. It shows up as a lack of effort, a pause between thoughts, a space where nothing needs to be done. You don't have to search for that space. You don't have to create it. It is already here. If your thoughts return to things you need to do later, you can let them pass without engaging. They don't need answers right now. There will be time for them later if they still matter. For now, you are allowed to be unavailable. Unavailable to decisions. Unavailable to expectations. Unavailable to urgency. You can let the sense of time soften around you. Minutes don't need to move forward in any particular way. They can stretch. They can blur. They can simply pass without being counted. You are not required to keep track. If your body shifts or adjusts, that's fine. If it remains completely still, that's fine too. There is no correct posture for rest. No right way to exist in this moment. You don't need to be comfortable. You only need to be here. Even if here feels vague or undefined. Even if it feels like nothing at all. Sometimes the most restful moments are the ones that don't feel like anything. They don't announce themselves. They don't ask for attention. They simply happen quietly in the background. And that is enough. If you notice your thoughts drifting toward tomorrow, toward plans or concerns or things unfinished, you don't have to pull them back. You can let them float there, untangled. They don't need resolution right now. This space doesn't require closure. It doesn't ask you to complete anything. It allows everything to remain unfinished. That can be a relief. There is nothing to fix. Nothing to prepare for. Nothing to get right. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything important. You are simply here. And that is already enough. If at any point your awareness fades, if your mind drifts into quiet or half-sleep, that's okay. You don't need to hold onto these words. They don't need to be remembered. They can pass through without leaving a trace. The space remains either way. You might notice the sense of effort slowly softening, not disappearing all at once, just loosening its grip, little by little. There is no rush for this, no timeline, no expectation, just the quiet permission to be as you are, to rest without purpose, to exist without explanation, to be here without needing to be anywhere else. And as this moment continues, as the space remains open, you can allow yourself to settle a little deeper into it. Not falling, not drifting away, just resting. There is no need to move toward anything now. No direction to follow. No destination waiting ahead. This moment does not ask you to arrive anywhere. It simply exists, open and unhurried. You might notice that the sense of time feels different here. Not slower or faster, just less important. Minutes don't need to be measured. Seconds don't need to be counted. They can pass quietly without asking for attention. You don't have to check in with yourself. You don't have to notice anything specific. You don't have to evaluate how you feel. Whatever is happening is allowed to happen. There is nothing to adjust. If your thoughts begin to fade in and out, that's a natural part of settling. If they come and go without forming anything clear, that's okay too. You are not required to hold on to them. You are not required to follow them. They can drift through, like distant sounds that don't need interpretation. This space does not demand clarity. It does not expect focus. It does not require intention. It simply allows things to be. You might sense a gentle slowing, not something you force, but something that happens on its own, as if your system is remembering how to rest without effort, how to release the need to stay alert, how to exist without being pulled in any direction. There is nothing you need to prepare for, nothing waiting on the other side of this moment, no task forming in the background. Everything that needs attention can wait. Here there is no rush. Even the idea of time feels softer now, less structured, less demanding. You may notice a subtle ease spreading. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a quiet sense of lessening. Less tension, less pressure, less urgency. And even if you don't notice that, even if everything feels exactly the same, that is perfectly fine. Nothing needs to change. You are allowed to rest exactly as you are. Your awareness can drift in and out. You might lose track of where one thought ends and another begins. That's okay. There is no need to follow any train of thought. You can let them pass without boarding. Nothing requires your attention right now. This space does not expect you to do anything. It is not waiting for you to respond. It simply exists quietly alongside you. If your breathing becomes slower, that's fine. If it stays the same, that's fine too. Nothing needs to be controlled. You are not guiding anything. You are simply allowing. And as time continues to move gently forward, you may notice a sense of neutrality settling in. Not happiness, not sadness, just ease. A quiet neutrality where nothing needs to be fixed, where nothing is missing, where nothing is wrong. Even if there are thoughts, even if there are sensations, even if there is awareness, none of it requires action. Everything can remain exactly as it is. There is no rush to reach an ending, no goal to reach, no point to arrive at. This moment does not need to lead anywhere. It can simply exist on its own. If you find yourself drifting toward sleep, that's fine. If you stay awake, that's fine too. There is no preferred outcome. Nothing here depends on what happens next. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to remember any of this. The words can fade in the background. They can blend into the quiet. They can dissolve completely. This space does not disappear when you stop paying attention. It remains steady, unchanging, available, and you are free to remain here for as long as you like.